The thing is, inclusion work, whether that be anti-racism or any anti-discriminatory work, it's really easy for those qualities that we gain to be rolled back unless that work is really sustained. Having it against data allows you to check in with the data and really see where you are, rather than have it be physical, have it be the kind of perspectives of your audience rather than something ingrained in the actual data.
I want to ask a question for everybody about data-driven studies. How do you think those studies contribute to achieving greater parity and representation in the European film and audiovisual sector?
So I had like a flashback to 2016 looking at those, because I started at the BFI doing a diversity data research project about black actors on screen, and also had gender in that, and whether people were lead roles or supporting roles, and the numbers are exactly the same. So I was having sort of flashbacks, PTSD. But I think what's important about the work and what I took from my background is research, and doing things with knowledge is always better than sort of fighting around in the dark for answers to things. And what I found about that research is the ability to be able to go into a conversation about diversity and inclusion and start with, so what are we going to do about it? As opposed to, well, is that a problem? How many people are we really talking about here? So when you see those numbers are so stark and they don't match up to reality, so the argument that we have that we're just reflecting how it is, and in our statistics, we only had sort of 14% of doctors on screen represented by women, when actually in the UK, 52% of our general doctors are women. That's not reflecting reality. So that ability to start the conversation at this is where we are and where do we want to get to is sort of really important. And the data is not the be-all and end-all, doesn't answer everything. If you're just doing data, you're not doing diversity and inclusion, but it does allow you to start from an informed position and base your actions around knowledge, which I think is super important.
Yeah, and just to...
Haven't even started yet.
And just to add to that, it's really easy for those things that have been implemented to be rolled back if it isn't rooted in data. The thing is, inclusion work, whether that be anti-racism or any anti-discriminatory work, it's really easy for those qualities that we gain to be rolled back unless that work is really sustained. Having it against data allows you to check in with the data and really see where you are, rather than have it be physical, have it be the kind of perspectives of your audience rather than something ingrained in the actual data.
Yeah, it holds you accountable, because if you don't know where you are, how can you get anywhere? You don't know where you're going to, you don't know whether it's really working. And what I found before we had data was that people were saying, but I think it's better because I saw that black guy on TV once, and I'm like, name another one. So the sort of perception, or even if you're seeing that on screen, what's happening off screen, is that really changing things, or are we talking about adding numbers? And the numbers aren't the whole story. So it was really interesting to me that you did the same work around sort of lead actors and profession, because that was exactly how we were trying to also assess the sort of quality of roles that people are allowed to play on screen. So, yeah.
You want to answer?
Yeah, I just can add quickly. I'm super grateful for the work you've done on that data, because it makes it so much clearer from what basis we're working on. And I was very curious to drill into that a little bit more and just understand better how that sort of clusters against the budgets and the industry. For us as a fund, that's a basis to work from, to understand which films are, composed in which way, which dimensions of diversity are included in what clusters of the industry. So the more we understand, the more information we have on that, the easier it is for us to take action or to work from. So thanks very much for providing it, first of all.
Yeah. And I actually have a question for you, Helge, as the managing director of More in Film Fundero. How do you perceive the role of film funding organization in promoting diversity and inclusion in the European film industry?
Well, film funds are instrumental in the European film funding, and we are spending a lot of public money. So I think we have a central role in also making sure that there's fair access to that money. And for us as a fund, we have different ways of operating. We're seen as gatekeepers mostly, I think, and I'd like to think that we can also be gate openers. And to think of it from that perspective opens a lot of new routes of looking at how we act as film funds. And I mean, for us, that sort of pans out on the decision-making process, understanding who's involved in the decision-making process as well as the application process. Who are we addressing to? How do we address different groups of applicants, possible applicants that we haven't actually addressed or that haven't perceived us as possible partners? How do we design our interfaces? And so on. So there's a lot of possibilities we have as funds to work towards a fairer representation off-screen and on-screen, both. I'm convinced that once we work on off-screen, on-screen will also follow, and it will have an effect on it. So our primary instinct as a fund would be to work on the structural situation of film funding, and from bettering that, hopefully and pretty surely, also the on-screen representation will change.
More to be back in the French context, Antoine, as you are working at Arcom, but you have a background in the French broadcaster France Télévisions. What measure do you believe could be implemented at the regulatory and supervisory level to encourage diversity and inclusion in the audiovisual and film sector in France and Europe?
Yeah. Wow, 2 hours. Maybe to answer, I would like to share four convictions on this issue. My first conviction is that the main key success factor is the will and the ambition at the top of the media organizations to take risk, to move lines of the representations in our programs. And one telling example, this week, France 2, the French public sector, broadcasted in prime time a 2-hour documentary, Homo en France, that is to say LGBT in France, the day before the International LGBTQI+ Day, or when TF1, the first private channel in France, created last year a new series whose name is Lycée Toulouse-Lautrec, an high school in charge of disabled students. The same thing with France Télévisions with season 1 of Drag Race France. So the first conviction is the will to change things. The second, because diversity brings audience. The second maybe conviction, the creation of a global ecosystem characterized by the collective commitment to work together to move lines. In this context, Joanna, you have a very important part, that is to say the part of producers of the new generations is absolutely essential. You have the tools and the skills to build these new inclusion bridges. Third conviction, maybe the involvement and the contribution of the regulator and the civil society, Collectif 50-50, etc., to create, I would say, a global and communication panorama and system that permits to count, that permits to analyze trends, to put real pressure on actors, to name and shame, sometimes, to raise awareness and foster innovation and change. And last conviction, maybe, for the actors and the regulator, the need to address these issues with nuance, trying to gather a large audience and complying in France with the values of the Republic.
If we switch back to a question of statistics, yesterday the Collectif released a study about parity among in the official competition at Cannes, Berlin, and Venice. So we talk about parity. It's easy to calculate. We're far beyond. The festival is celebrating 33% of women directors selected in competition. We believe that it's not enough. If we were able legally to look at inclusion, representation of the country, we would be able to celebrate, not only just name and shame, but celebrate the second black women directors selected in competition since 1946. We're not allowed to do that. So it's one thing to count, it's another thing to celebrate. Like do that. I'm going to be very transparent. Politically speaking, the French law it's something above the level of the Republic. It's a big value about not being able to do statistics like that. Question is, we are advocating to be able to celebrate and do that. At the same time, we'd hear voices saying, well, in France, if it were to happen, extremists, extreme right, parties from the extreme right would use the statistics in a bad way. Okay, we personally don't know at the level of Collectif where to stand on that, because so experiences from your other European countries on that matter, maybe on a wider angle than just cinema, but of course we, the Collectif 50 would have to build this negotiation from the way up, because it comes from the biggest, from the highest layers of the Republic. But do you have a take on that? We really don't know where to stand.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
No,
Go on.
go on. I think the simplest solution to your problem is to have the work stand in the sun. I think we're so used to having work like this, it's done with embarrassment and shame, so it's done in a quiet corner in the dark. I think that if you open up the work, yes, collecting data will be equally harmful as it is helpful, but if the work is done in the sun, then that's up for public scrutiny. And so therefore, you're less likely to be damaging towards historically marginalized communities, because the global perspective, I hope, is still one of progress.